Hello and welcome to week 9. It's the week you've all been waiting for. And that's because, if I can go back to the beginning here, we started with this pyramid idea, right? We had data, and data is a huge part of what you hopefully feel more comfortable with. Data can be manipulated, data can be organized, and once the data is organized, you then create some sort of group or pattern in order to make that have some hierarchy, make some sense, and then you are working on and have been working on the past couple of weeks is how do people get around this data? And that is in a short answer to that is query strings, meaning you have done a little bit of data work, if not a lot, in this class. And a query string is just a query. And you've learned that that your queries can be direct, such as give me this or not, by putting all of the data to be manipulated by the user, which is a technique, but also bigger picture. How do I group this in a way to help introduce these topics to people? So you've done a lot, but still, you only have gotten to information, right? The information was there once you did HTML and put something on a page. Information is there that you let someone view it and manipulate it. And that's all you've gotten. So the next step up the pyramid happens this week with knowledge. But before we get there, let me just give some tips because one thing I know that you all hopefully appreciate is I do want to give you feedback. I do. I understand none of this is, or all of this may be new to you. Some it may be not be that new, which is fine. One thing that might be new is this idea of doing a flow in this see-do flow, and it was meant really just to be quick. I know it might have taken people a little bit of time, but coming up with something and being able to notate it quickly is always useful in our discipline because seeing it, thinking it through, just being able to do some sort of shorthand, I hope is helpful. It is a part of the assignment, so I will give you some uh, grade on it, I suppose. So I'm working on grading now and looking forward to that. But all of this is just feedback because all of these techniques are meant to be things now you apply to another service. And especially getting around, that's going to be probably the half or the last third of your thing is how do you get around and what clever choices did they make to help you get around? But one thing, hopefully, that's become more evident is that your topic and your data almost doesn't matter that much. The ways that people manipulate data are very similar. And I know you guys have come up with somewhat different ways of doing things, which is fine, but if you start to look, there's normal and there's norms around this, right? And what's great about this is that you don't have to invent everything all the time. You're really just inventing words, and the words are the most important thing, and the words are what I'm going to be looking at. What words do people click on? What happens when they click on those words? You're the wording is really most of the work that you've done because those words are critical to making your topic different from another, but the actual layouts and the way things operate and the flow can be very similar to any other site. In fact, it's a good thing that it is because it helps people in a UX way called learnability, right? You don't want to learn new ways of doing things usually. You want to do things in a way that you're familiar with. And so these have all become familiar ways of manipulating information. So I'm looking forward to giving you guys feedback. But one thing I do want to emphasize is that the techniques that you've used from starting with the data to figuring out what words to use, how to group that information, and then how to sort and present that information is something that's most of the work from now on for your final paper. Now, one thing you will have, brand new thing, is identity. And often the identity isn't that special. In fact, you'll find out because we're going to look at some of these. Also, I'm more than happy to take on new platforms. Some of these are still around and have changed a lot over the time of this course, but they still are all based on one thing, which is you get to submit the data. And that's the only important thing. You don't have curated data such as Metacritic or we often do movies in this class, so IMDb isn't user-generated data, which is good because they want to make sure that the data is authoritative. In all of these, you submit the data. And then the way it is organized is up to the questions that they ask you. So you'll, first of all, be able to outline the data. And I would get there right away because I think part of the first question here is like, what is the core data? Like what content are they particularly relying upon you submitting? And there's usually some metadata, right? They're going to ask, try to say a little bit about what makes your data there's going to be some sort of metadata involved in it. But the metadata is the topic of this week. What is it? How does it work? And so we've got a couple of questions, which is, one, does anyone trust metadata? I'm always on the fence because you never know, right? Because I've been in this business for a while and I can generate metadata. There's oftentimes it's gameable, and there's a big long paragraph here that I wrote for some reason. So there's maybe an explanation there. But also one thing we didn't get into in this class, and it is another class in the program, which I think is really interesting, is data visualization. This has a lot to do with numbers. We didn't do numbers for this reason because numbers rely upon a whole different set of tools in order to understand it. And those tools are also have lots of ins and outs, but I'm just going to give some examples of those. I'm a huge fan of interactive data visualizations. Here's just a few if you want to get familiar with it. Interactive just suits me better because that's the world we live in. I think you can tell a better story through interaction than something that's static. But both are very valuable when it comes to understanding numbers. Same holds true though. You can lie just as easily with these sort of graphs and mislead, often for good purposes. Like, here's a wine ratings vintage and wine chart. What happens is you tend not to really think too closely about how did this become this number, right? You're just looking for patterns, bigger patterns. Um, in any case, some reading and some light exploration, but the real goal this week is number one is to pick a service and or suggest one if I know there's a lot of sites for submitting things like 3D models and things like that. Anything where you get to understand exactly what the data is. And this week, make sure go in, create an account in this service and submit something to this service. That's even true of Wikipedia. You're welcome to go and submit a Wikipedia article. In case you didn't know, anyone can submit an article to Wikipedia, but that gives you your base data, and then you get to use the techniques that we've learned of how is that organized? What is the taxonomy? What are the ways that people could ever find the information that you submit? And that's true of all these, and that's what most of the paper is going to be about. And the paper is going to be on Medium, which is another fantastic service. And the paper is going to be part of your portfolio, which is you hopefully again learning and using the techniques that we've practiced to look at another service, which I hope is easier, right? Because it is hard to build these services, no doubt, but they aren't necessarily complex. There is one thing I can say that things like, let's see, Twitter or X, I mean, they change a lot, I guess, which is it's sort of interesting, right? That they change and add new features. You really should focus on the core features. It's really important sometimes to go to the Wayback Machine or some way of looking at a site before today to see what was the purpose. It's fun to go back to YouTube, for example, just to see when popularity fails. It really failed on YouTube in the beginning because the most popular movie was just the one that they put on their homepage. And then it became more and more and more popular until it was outrageously popular that everyone wanted to go look at it. Uh, but that isn't really popularity. That's just happens to be, hey, we've got this new service, and this just happens to be easy enough to engage with or something. Anyway, looking back in time, I'm more than happy to help with any tips because all of these do, to me, have very key clever information architecture decisions. That's all. They just figured out a clever way to help you organize the content for them so that they can build a site around massive, massive amounts of content. And it really, back to the thing that even though the content differs, they all have very specific ways of handling that content and organizing that content. And that's your goal for the paper, is to analyze and unpack how did they do it. And as always, I'm happy to help, but in this case, I just want to make sure we're all on the right path, as always. So if you want some feedback on your ideas, just share them here. Make sure to look at others, as always, and look forward to looking at your assignment number 3.